us members of the PDGA allowing monopolization, it has a negative effect on our sport. And this person is just overriding it because of what is in their best benefit, tends to have a conflict of interest. And no one seemed to agree with the choice.
What's up, disgenerates? It's the disc golf world, recapping everything disc golf you need to know from over the weekend. I'm Jefferson, and as always, alongside me, the one with all the holes in his game, Swiss Cheese. Before we get into the Champions Cup recap, let's hear what Drew Gibson had to say about the lack of professionalism in our sport, a topic we're way too familiar with. Specifically, Drew thinks that standardization should come from the PDGA as the DGPT follows the standards the governing body of the sport sets out. He goes on to explain a few examples, such as the baskets at the Music City Open being designed wrong, leaving a gap at the bottom allowing for more spitouts than Riley Reid. The space at the bottom pushed more discs out than a typical basket design should. I'll let Drew tell you guys why this is bad since he is the professional.
They had the wrong basket for the way the poles were. The top assembly with the chains on it was supposed to have 2 more links on every single strand, which, as you can see in this basket here, the chains hang into the basket. If you go to Music City Open coverage, the actual chains where they hang like this is above the rim. So what happens is the chains, they don't have time to react, and I had a putt, hit dead center, hit the bottom of the basket, and jump out because the chains aren't in the bottom to catch it once it's in the bottom of the target.
I don't know why people see this as complaining, especially when Drew puts it in the words of this being their job. The easy answer is to brush that off and just say they throw frisbees for a living, so they should suck it up. After spending the past 3 months alongside them, I understand the levels they have to go to just to survive. So yeah, when the equipment isn't up to par, someone needs to speak up. Shout out to Drew, Brody, and Yuli for being some of the biggest voices in the sport. We'll continue to use our platform as a way of sharing pros' message without them having to worry about the backlash. Don't worry, we can eat that for you guys. That's why I love when people comment about our bad takes, mostly because it was probably told to us by one of your favorite pros. Another perk of us being at the events. Nearly every pro has opinions as strong as Drew Gibson. Not necessarily the same, but off camera, 90% of pros have something quote-unquote negative to say that would be deemed complaining by the community. So why say anything that could potentially hurt disc sales? So keep those DMs coming, pros. We always appreciate the insight, and don't worry, we ain't ever snitching. The other funny thing Drew mentioned was the event not using the new dynamic baskets, which he said are actually better. We'll find out next week for ourselves, but kinda sucks for DD having to hear all this smack talk about their product when they already have a solution. Not sure if Drew's been saving notes the past couple weeks and was waiting to make this video, because he keeps the receipts coming. His next issue was with the so-called standard T-pads for 2025, going on to say they essentially hold water, so if there is any rain, you're screwed. He went on to say James Conrad was bouncing on it like a trampoline. Sounds like we haven't heard the end of the T-pad issues quite yet. Just like the UDisc versus PDGA live debate that Drew jumped in on. Basically saying what we all have already. It's been a downgrade, it's stupid the PDGA didn't accept the discount code, now just adding the cut line feature, and the idea of this feeding the monopoly they built. Which leads to the biggest and most controversial topic he brought up. Saying he doesn't find it right having someone be the judge, jury, and executioner, which is the role Nate Heinold currently has. I don't have time to run down all the logistics behind it, maybe we can do that in another video. But the problem arose during the 4-hour weather delay during Champions Cup. The way Drew put it, nobody wanted to finish that second round. The course was just too dangerous. I mean, when you have to paint red circles all around the woods so people don't get hit by potential falling branches, it's not a stretch. But there was one person that wanted to continue play. That person happened to be Nate Heinold. You know, the guy with all this power. And guess what happened? They played the round.
I talked to a bunch of the PDGA representatives, and they weren't happy about the operations and how it went. And, oh, you think I want to be here at 6:45 in the morning or 6 a.m., to get all this ready? There was one person that wanted us to play that day, and it was coincidentally the person that made the choice. We're playing in a PGA major tournament, which is the biggest tier of tournament you could play in, and no one seemed to agree with the choice.
Probably not the best thing when someone with a behind-the-scenes business that benefits from decisions he directly makes having so much power. But hey, what do I know?
So when you have someone running a tournament that is in charge of the president of the PDGA, so everyone answers to this person, and then you have other people not wanting something to happen, and this person is just overriding it because of what is in their best benefit, tends to have a conflict of interest. And I think that the PDGA board and employees of the PDGA should have the members in mind first, is what should happen. The The membership first is what our organization should be.
Shout out to Drew for being the voice of the pros. Someone's got to do it. And make sure to go check out his full video over there because he had a lot more to say. Now, Swiss, hit the Disgenerates with the FPO recap.
After 3 days of continual Northwood beatings, the players remaining looked fatigued, broken, shell-shocked, stressed, and most already looking for the exit. 3 days of wet and sloppy conditions, let alone the emotional roller coaster players are put through with a major tournament on one of the most difficult courses on tour, is hard for most to endure. All made worse with such a poor fan turnout, which was the most disappointing turnout of any tour stop all season thus far. Yes, you heard that correctly. The first major of the season saw the lowest fan turnout of all the prior stops, even Jonesboro, and no one was there. Low fan attendance is a problem that seems to be becoming a trend, and the giant elephant in the room that most are still trying to ignore. But that's a discussion for another video. With the lack of turnout, it doesn't provide the emotional lift and excitement that the fans create that players can feed off of, making the event feel flat and lethargic. Adjectives that you don't want to hear surrounding a 4-day major. A shame, since the FPO had great storylines over the entire weekend that didn't just orbit around the best player in the world, Kristen Tatar. A weekend with breakouts from young players in Silva Saarinen, unknowns in Rachel Turton, dominant performances in Evelina Salinen's day 3-7 under, while the entire action still being close enough that heading into the final day, it was still anyone's race. Evelina came into the final after having her best round the day before, was 10 under for the tournament with a 2-stroke lead over Tatar, who was facing the pressure of exceeding expectations in the Estonian fans who traveled across the globe to witness another Tatar major championship. Behind her was a charging Owen Scoggins with enough experience to know that though 5 strokes back, on a course where tree kicks can cause double and triple bogeys, was still very much in contention. And then there was Turton, who was looking to shock the disc golf community on her first final day lead card of a major in her short career, setting the stage for one exciting final day. Then, Northwood kicked them in the shins on the very first hole, as 3 of the 4 would go on to bogey the first hole. The front half wouldn't be much better either, as the entire lead card all went into the back half over for their rounds. Tatar scored 5 bogeys on the front half with a single birdie as she slid down the leaderboard, to the dismay of the few in attendance, those watching at home, and the pocketbooks of those Estonian Tatar fan group. She would never push for the contention of the win, or the podium for that matter. She would finish 3 over for the round and a top 5 finish. It also saw her streak of 960 rated rounds, or better, come to an end on the final day as she finished below 950, a streak that lasted for 64 straight rounds, where the next closest was Missy at 26. Evelina, after a double bogey on 7, would be 2 over on the front half, not looking nearly as in command as she did the day prior. Was fortunate to enter with a 2-stroke lead, and the nearest competitor having a worse day than her. Owen, who fared the most consistently on the front, was still frustrated, starting off with 7 straight pars. Yes, par is great at Northwood, and that lead card front half proves that. But with her needing to make moves to close the 5-stroke gap that she began with, pars feel as good as bogeys at that point. Most of the early action was from the 2 Europeans in Silva Saarinen and Henna Blomroos from chase card, or players too far down the leaderboard to create waves at the top. Silva and Henna would push the lead card and created the needed drama late. Silva, who started with a bogey, rattled off 3 straight birdies directly after, and was 1 C1X putt miss from another on hole 5. Added 2 birdies on the back half as she looked to push for a podium finish. Would find OB on 17 and could not birdie 18, putting her 3 under for the round and 6 under for the tournament. Watching the action on lead card to see where she would land. Henna would have a single bogey on the day, a feat only matched by one other single player for that round, as she kicked off her front half 1 under for the round. Henna's ability to remain clean when bogeys were being stacked left and right for the remainder of the field was what allowed her to push for a podium finish. That and her putting was also keeping her very much involved, only missing 3 C1X putts all day. Would score 2 early birdies on the back, cutting Evelina's lead as she would be 5 under with some scoring potential on the final holes, including 18 where she eagled all 3 days prior. Evelina would cut that 2 over down to 1 after a birdie on 10, heading to the easiest hole of the course, and 11, looking to get back to even for the round. Yet after a missed putt in the circle, it would result in a bogey, shrinking her lead again. With pars coming on holes that she birdied the days prior, her lead would continue to shrink as she continued. With 2 putt from the circle on 2 holes late on 16 and 18 that would have sealed her victory far earlier. Owen took advantage as she would have a clean back half with 2 birdies on 12 and 13 that put her at 6 under, only 2 strokes off the lead. Would par out heading into 18. Luckily for fans, making 18 must watch. for both the chase and lead card, as not only was the victory in reach for multiple players, but also podium positioning. Henna at 5 under for the tournament, needing an eagle to put pressure on her best friend. Evelina stepped up to a 29-footer and would bury it to finish at 7 under, a stroke behind Evelina, who was checking scores nonstop according to her. Stepped up to the tee, needing to clear the gap, only needing a par for a win. Her drive pushed to the rough, but fortunately for her, not deep enough that she could not handle as her approach would make the opening. Though every fan wanted Owen to run her 100-foot-plus eagle approach shot to push a playoff, with high winds and the pin on a hill that caused rollaways, she instead did elect to lay up for the birdie, for a tie in second place with Henna and a guaranteed payday, leaving Evelina to putt out for par on her way to her second major of her career. And unlike her Kona Peach Day victory, a major without a fan-made asterisk. This major also continued to highlight the international dominance in the FPO. The top 6 players were all born outside the US, and 7 total in the top 10. 4 of those 7 coming from Finland alone, with Evelina's first place, Henna's second, Silva's fourth, and Heidi Laney's 9th place finish. Even Jenny Karppinen, look, though some might be keeping their head in the sand on the fact that the international players in the FPO are taking over the sport, with a second victory on the season for Evelina, one can no longer claim or argue it's a single player in Tatar dominating the sport. Even the USWDGC, the year's earlier major, had 4 international players in the top 10 and 3 in the top 5. Every international player made the cut at Champions Cup, a very strong performance when they made up a small percentage of the 48-player field. With performance like these past ones, the growth of the sport overseas, Tatar still being huge, and Europe seeing a world championship next year that will only help in participation and growth, could be more of a glimpse into a continued dominance for years to come.
Over on the MPO side, Andrew f***ing Presnell, baby. Come on, who had Presnell taking down this thing on their bingo card? I mean, if you watch Foundation, you've been told he doesn't have the skills to win, so I don't blame you. After going into the day with a lead at his first ever major lead card appearance, because if you didn't know by now, he's never had a top 10 at a major in his life, only 2 top 20s. Presnell played his first major in 2017, and between then has played over 250 tournaments, averaging 1 every 9.8 days. He's the definition of the weekend grinder, and it was dope to see him prove his skills on the hardest course in the world. Started off the front getting birdies on 3 and 4, but would throw his approach away for a bogey before capping off the front with a birdie on 9. At this point, if he could play clean, it would be his. And as he described, his plan the entire weekend was to not go for any hero shots. Instead, pitching out, which is what helped him never take anything worse than a bogey the entire event. Yeah, that's pretty impressive at Northwood, especially in these conditions. Some people call it Grandpa Golf, but now you gotta call Gramps a major champion. I feel like I gotta bring it up, but I don't want to talk about it for too long because I think it's dumb. But no, that was not a foot fault on 16. The Bushnell putt distances are almost always off, kind of like the PDGA live stats. It was clearly outside, I promise. I guess Nicholas Antela isn't tired of taking second place quite yet, jumping up 2 places to claim the spot. Finished the front 9-3 down with his only blemish on the first hole, but the back would get rocky, carding the same amount of bogeys as birdies. After the way Presnell was walking through the course, it would have taken a special round to catch him. Ricky Wysocki was trying to put that together with 9 birdies on the day. Unfortunately, he would also have 3 bogeys, and I haven't even mentioned that triple on 14 yet. At least the Raptor legs were on point with a pretty solid day from the putting green. Hopefully that translates for the rest of the season. Ezra Robinson secures his first ever major podium finish. Maybe that trophy can fit right in between Isaac's Worlds and Champions Cup trophy. Started his round off with a bogey on 3 and followed it up with another on 5. Ended the front 9 even, only to keep the roller coaster going on the back half. Finally walked away from 14 without a bruise, so that was good to see. Andrew Presnell won with a 15 under at a 4-day tournament. That's a typical hot round at other courses we see on tour. I'm curious to see how watching the live coverage was, so make sure to comment below, because one thing's for sure, no one cared in person. The least amount of people I've ever seen at a live event, and I went to the 2020 Silver Cup. I think disc golf is still in a weird phase finding what works best for in-person viewing and TV coverage. But I haven't seen any coverage this year since I've been at all the events, so definitely let me know in the comments. Now for some final round quick hitters. Heidi Laney making her magic happen with the ace. Evan Smith also makes the people happy, smacking the ace on 17. Must be those Clash discs. Alden Harris with the sick throw-in on 12 with the even cooler die job. Ricky shows off his breakfast scramble routine. Kristen Tatar and the rest of the Europeans head home. Can't even convince the players to go to the West. Why do you expect us to be there? There's lots of commotion about the ratings over at Northwood, but I failed algebra twice, so can't help you there. Is hole 12 too hard? The answer is no, but I like the course designer versus designer battle. Who you picking? Heinold with the power of God or Dodge with the laser vision? Andrew Presnell has gotten more texts in the last 24 hours than the past 24 years. Shout out to the Jomez boys for staying up until 3 a.m. getting all the coverage done. Yes to Big German, Yuli, and the crew, but especially to those editors staying up to make sure everything's perfect. It's hella hard work that goes unthanked, so thank you. And that's everything you need to know from Champions Cup. Follow the disc golf world to not miss out on the next tournament breakdown for the DDO. If you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. It's the easiest way to support the boys well, we're actually back home now, so just supporting us. Oh yeah, and if you want to hear about all the disaster of round 2 and 3 of Champions Cup, check out the video right here. Shout out to each and every one of you disgenerates supporting over on Patreon and our members. We couldn't do what we love without you guys, as the disc golf world is 100% funded by the fans. So we appreciate the support.